Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by Maryland Political Predictions. Before we get into it, remember to subscribe, drop a like to show some support to the channel. Let's get to 1.5 thousand subscribers by August. Let's hope for that. Anyways, today we're taking a deeper look into the 2026 United States Senate elections. I haven't done this kind of video for predicting the 2026 Senate results in several months. I think it's been 4 or 5 months since I've done it. But yeah, let's get right into it. As you can see, I've already filled out a lot of the Senate seats that are not really very contested. Let me also fill in Colorado right here. And then Republicans sit at 44-42 against Democrats, but a lot of these seats I still want to talk about, especially New Mexico, Illinois, and New Jersey. Both of these states, all three of these states are shifting to the right on the national level. But I feel like New Jersey Senator Cory Booker and New Mexico Senator Ben Ray Lujan are able to hold out in a red wave and much less a blue wave. They're going to be able to win big. And Democrats, they're going to be able to hold these 3 Senate seats in all of my predictions for the 2026 United States Senate races. Now let's also talk about the state of Montana. So 2024 on the Senate level in Montana, it was quite close because the incumbent was a Democrat, Jon Tester. That is not the case anymore, as incumbent Republican Steve Daines should be able to win by a solid margin. Now let's get into some of these unshaded states. Let's start with Iowa and South Carolina, because I really just want to talk about the primaries in these states. In Iowa, incumbent Republican Senator Joni Ernst is already facing some very, very harsh opposition from very popular Democrat state auditor Rob Sand. So Rob Sand is the only Democratic state-level government official in Iowa. There's no Democratic senator from Iowa. There's no Democratic governor, lieutenant governor, that kind of stuff. So Rob Sand is really the head of the Democratic coalition in the state of Iowa. And Rob Sand could definitely give Joni Ernst a run for money. Let's see here. In Iowa, Joni Ernst is already facing some really interesting opposition from Jim Carlin in the primary, and Joshua Smith, who's actually a former member of the Libertarian Party, but that doesn't really matter. Joni Ernst should win over 80% of the vote there in the primary. But yeah, Rob Sand definitely is going to be able to pull in at least around 40-something% of the vote in my predictions. I'm going to put Iowa in my prediction right now as lean Republican. This means that Joni Ernst will win it in my prediction by 3 to 5%. Alright, now let's move on to the state of South Carolina. Incumbent Republican Lindsey Graham, who's been described as Rhino by many MAGA Republicans, could be facing some extreme primary opposition by MAGA representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina. She has been kind of known as the Republican version of someone like Jasmine Crockett or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So Nancy Mace could definitely give Lindsey Graham a run for his money in a primary if she runs, which she likely will. If Graham loses a primary and Mace is a nominee, I would put it as a likely Republican race. If Graham holds his seat in the primary, I would also put it as likely Republican. Either way, I do not see a Democrat winning the South Carolina Senate race, no matter who is the nominee. Alright, now let's move on to the state of Nebraska. So Nebraska was plus 21 on the presidential level in 2024, and Republican Senator Pete Ricketts, he could definitely face Dan Osborne. Dan Osborne, if you don't remember, was the independent candidate against Deb Fischer in the 2024 Nebraska Senate race. Deb Fischer won by, I think, around 8 to 9 points. So Dan Osborne, independent, blue-collar worker, he can definitely unseat Pete Ricketts in a blue wave. But for now, I'm going to put Nebraska in the lean Republican category. Now let's finish off the wave of Republican primaries in the state of Texas. Incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn has already entered a vicious primary brawl with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. So let's go to Texas here. Yeah, many popular senators, including Senator Majority Leader John Thune, and MAGA senators like Rick Scott and Tim Scott, they've come out in support for Cornyn. They don't. While several Texas representatives, Lance Gooden and Troy Nehls, have both endorsed Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton is definitely more of the MAGA candidate in this race, and this is really what MAGA sees as their chance to unseat another rhino senator, in their opinion. So no candidate on the Democratic side has officially announced their candidacy yet, but there's several good candidates that have publicly expressed interest. Colin Elred, he was a Democratic nominee for Senate in 2024 and former U.S. representative from Texas's 32nd. And there's also Beto O'Rourke. He was a presidential candidate in 2020, gubernatorial candidate in 2022, Senate candidate in 2018. So Beto O'Rourke, he's tried to run for a lot of positions in the state of Texas. He hasn't succeeded yet, but could this be his chance against either Paxton or Cornyn? Cornyn, if he wins nomination, he would definitely lose a lot of that MAGA support. But if Paxton wins, he could definitely lose a bunch of potential independent voters that could have voted down ballot for Texas Republicans. So I'm going to put Texas in the lean Republican category. Alright, now let's move on to the state of Florida. This one is held by incumbent Ashley Moody. She was appointed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis in early 2025, and I don't think she's going to face any opposition in this race, in the primary at least. And Democrats, I don't feel like they have an exactly strong candidate to run here, and I'm going to put Florida in the likely Republican category along with Kansas and South Carolina. Alright, now let's move on to the state of Virginia. This one's held by incumbent Democrat Mark Warner. He will be running for re-election, as it seems for now. And Virginia, depending on what the results are of the 2025 gubernatorial race there, I'm going to have to put Virginia into the likely Democratic column for now. Tim Kaine, he was the lesser popular incumbent Democratic senator from Virginia, and Mark Warner is a bit more popular, and I do feel like Warner should be able to keep Virginia blue in 2026. Alright, now let's move on to the state of Alaska. This is not held by the Rhino Republican Lisa Murkowski. It's held by a more conservative Republican Dan Sullivan. And the best Democrat they could run here is going to be former Representative Mary Peltola, who lost her seat in a sort of red ripple in 2024 in the U.S. House. So Mary Peltola, she's either going to run for the Senate seat or run for the Alaska gubernatorial seat. If Peltola runs, I'll put this race in the lean Republican category. Actually, no, I could definitely put it in the tilt Republican category. But if it's some other generic Alaska Democrat, I would definitely put it here. For now, I'm just going to put it in the likely Republican category, Alright, now let's move on to the state of New Hampshire. So, New Hampshire, it's held by incumbent Democrat Jeanne Shaheen. She has announced her retirement and will not be seeking re-election in 2026. The only mainstream Democrat so far that has announced his candidacy is representative from New Hampshire's 1st Congressional District, Chris Pappas. The other New Hampshire representative, Maggie Goodlander, has she declined running, and she has endorsed Pappas. So has several other New Hampshire Democrats, including Jeanne Shaheen herself and the fellow Democratic senator from New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, and also there's a couple others as well. But so far, Chris Pappas is the only candidate to run in the Democratic primary to be the next senator from the state of New Hampshire. I'm going to have to put New Hampshire in the likely Democratic column for now. Now let's move on to the state of Ohio. Like Florida, John Husted was appointed to the vacant seat from J.D. Vance in early 2025, this time by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. He will likely be seeking re-election, and I'm going to have to put this race also into the likely Republican category, along with South Carolina, Kansas, and Florida. John Husted he's not facing any good primary challengers, and I feel like if Ohio will be contested, it's going to be on the gubernatorial level, where possibly either Tim Ryan or Sherrod Brown would run against Vivek Ramaswamy. But there is a case of a scenario where Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan runs for governor and the other runs for Senate, and that there will be interesting results in that case. But for now, I'm just going to put Ohio in the likely Republican category. Alright, now let's move on to the state of Michigan. Incumbent Democratic Senator Gary Peters is retiring, and this is probably going to be the most contentious Democratic primary on the Senate level, at least, because we've already seen several Democrats announce their candidacies in this primary, including Mallory McMorrow, the state senator from the 8th District, Haley Stevens, the representative from the 11th District, Joe Tate, state representative from the 9th District, and there's several others who have expressed interest, including Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. I think that's how you pronounce it. But this is definitely going to be probably one of the most competitive Democratic primaries, because we haven't seen many of these yet, especially with all the Republican ones stirring up in Texas and South Carolina. So this could be definitely Democrats' most contentious primary. And, I think in Michigan, the Republican primary, they have Tudor Dixon publicly expressing interest. And Mike Rogers, he has declared his run, former representative, and also the nominee for U.S. Senate in 2024. He lost this race by just a couple percentage points. Republicans' best bet here would probably be nominating either Mike Rogers or incumbent U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga from Michigan's 4th Congressional District. But right now, I'm going to label this one as a tilt Democratic seat, because Gretchen Whitmer and Pete Buttigieg, they are both not running for the Senate seat, even though Whitmer is term limited for governor and Pete Buttigieg, he has no political office. They are both hinting that they will run for president in 2028. Speaking of governors not being able to run for another term, I'm just going to come here to Kentucky for a sec. Incumbent Republican Senator Mitch McConnell is finally retiring, and that leaves open a seat. So in Kentucky, we've seen two main Republican primary candidates so far. That's former gubernatorial candidate in 2023, Daniel Cameron. So he's running, and also U.S. representative from Kentucky. But either way, Kentucky's going to be a safe Republican. Come on. And Andy Beshear, he's also declined that he's to run in this Kentucky Senate race. Alright, now let's go to the state of Minnesota, where another incumbent Democrat is retiring. And this is what we've seen quite a lot so far. A bunch of incumbent Democrats retiring, a lot of them in somewhat contentious states. Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire. Dick Durbin retired in Illinois, which isn't exactly contentious. But Democrats' main goal here is going to be defending seats like in Minnesota or in Michigan, while also attacking seats in North Carolina and maybe Nebraska or Iowa, depending what they want to focus on. But anyways, in Minnesota, Tina Smith, she's retiring, and there's already another Democratic primary that's really stirring up here. Probably the only other really contentious one besides Michigan. Angie Craig, U.S. Representative for Minnesota's 2nd, and Penny Flanagan, the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. So this is kind of a more moderate versus progressive primary here. Angie Craig, she's picked up endorsements from Andy Kim in New Jersey and Ruben Gallego from Arizona, and a bunch of more moderate, representatives. Former Representative Dean Phillips, he's definitely a moderate, but Penny Flanagan has picked up endorsements from two senators, Elizabeth Warren and former Senator Al Franken. He retired a while ago, man, but he is from Minnesota. So this could also be a very interesting primary to watch. Angie Craig, I feel like Minnesota Republicans, independents, I don't think the progressive governorship in Minnesota would really help with Penny Flanagan's case. But either way, I feel like either of them would win. I would put Penny Flanagan, if she's the nominee, I would put it as lean Republican. Likely Democrat. And if Penny Flanagan is a nominee, lean Democrat. But I'm just going to put it as a likely Democrat for now. But I don't know if there's been any polls here. Have there? Okay, yeah, there has. Penny Flanagan kind of destroys Angie Craig, 52-22. And even with 27 undecideds, Penny Flanagan still achieved a straight-up majority. But this was from 4 months ago, so take it with a grain of salt. All right, that leaves 3 races, and we'll start off with the state of Maine. So, unlike the Maine gubernatorial race, where we've seen several Democrats jump in, we haven't really seen that in Maine. And, Maine is, Rhino Susan Collins, she's probably going to declare candidacy soon. You haven't seen that many Democrats jump into the race, and even these two, they're basically unknown. I mean, Jordan Wood, former chief of staff to Representative Katie Porter, who's from California, David Costello, former deputy secretary of the Maryland Department of the Environment. Like, come on, what is this? And, Jeanette Mills, governor of Maine, she could run, but I just don't really see it. And both representatives from Maine, Shelley Pingree and Jared Golden, they've declined running. So I don't really see the Democrats putting up a strong candidate here to take down Susan Collins. And just for that, I'm going to put Susan Collins winning this seat by tilt Republican. But the stupidest thing that Republicans could do here is challenging Susan Collins. Like, you can primary rhinos basically anywhere else in the country. Murkowski in Alaska, Cornyn in Texas, but not in Maine, because Maine is just so Democrat. Susan Collins is really the only person that can win for the Republicans here. And a very rhino Republican who votes with you maybe 60% of the time is better than having a liberal Democrat from here who votes against you 100% of the time. So yeah, Republicans, if they don't primary Susan Collins out, they should be good in Maine. All right, now let's talk about the state of Georgia. Incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff, he is going to try and hold out in the state of Georgia, but really great news for him. It came out like a month ago, I think. The governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, he announced that he would not be running for this seat because, he is term limited, so why not run? Maybe he's going to run for president in 2028. Who knows? But Brian Kemp, he is not running for this Georgia Senate seat. And honestly, he was one of the only candidates that could beat Jon Ossoff. Because, let's just check out the Republican primary here. Maybe the best candidate so far, it's going to be Buddy Carter, representative here. And then there's a bunch of other representatives who could run. But then again, there's no big name standing out here that's probably more popular than Brian Kemp. You have people like Brad Raffensperger. I feel like he's kind of moderate. You have Doug Collins, Kelly Loeffler. Oh, God, I forgot how to pronounce that. Mike Collins, possibly all potential ones. But, Brian Kemp declining to run for this race. And thank God for Republicans. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she would also decline to run. If she was a nominee there, that would have been a bloodbath for Republicans, let me tell you that. But just because there's no formidable Republican who's going to run, at least so far, like Brian Kemp against Jon Ossoff, I'm going to have to put this seat in the tilt Democratic category. Now let's move on to our final race of this video, and that's going to be North Carolina. Incumbent Republican Tom Tillis. He got promised to not get primaried, it seems like, and he's been called a rhino by a bunch of people. And I don't think, even if they put out a MAGA Republican, he's not going to get very... That Republican wouldn't get really far, because look at this massive chunk of U.S. senators who have already endorsed Tom Tillis. And, this includes MAGA Republicans like John Barrasso, Tom Cotton, and Mark Wayne Mullen. So I really don't see Tom Tillis getting primaried out. Although it seemed kind of likely a couple months ago, but that kind of has faded. And the Democrats, the only person they could really run is Roy Cooper. I don't see Wiley Nickel. He's a former representative. He only served one term. The only person that could really run against Tillis is going to be Roy Cooper. And I feel like he is going to run, because I don't think he would let his fellow North Carolina Democrats out to dry, especially after Josh Stein completely crushed the gubernatorial race last year. So if Roy Cooper does run, I put the seat as lean Democrat. So yeah, this is my final... Sorry, not my final. This is my second, I believe, or third maybe, U.S. Senate prediction. And I have Democrats with 48 seats, Republicans at 52. Democrats gain 1 seat, and that is in North Carolina. Roy Cooper beating out Tom Tillis. So thank you for watching once again. Remember to subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.